Okay, to review from yesterday and the day before, sine is the opposite over the hypotenuse, cosine is the adjacent over the hypotenuse, and the tangent is the opposite over the adjacent side. And so yesterday we did finding missing sides. Now we're going to talk about how you can use those same trig ratios and functions to find missing angles in right triangles. So just a quick reminder again, the sine is of an angle x is the opposite over the hypotenuse. The cosine of an angle x is the adjacent over the hypotenuse. And the tangent of an angle x is the opposite over the adjacent. So we can use those then to solve for missing angles as well, but we're actually going to be using the inverse functions. So if we set this ratio up, we're trying to find x and y, so we're going to start with x. So we're going to say the sine of a 57-degree angle is going to be equal to x over 25. Okay, so this is a review of what we did yesterday, finding a missing side. So we would multiply both sides by 25 and get that x is equal to 21. You can also do the cosine of 57 and then do the adjacent, which is y over 25, and get that y is about 13.6. Okay, so here's what we're going to do is we're going to set everything up exactly the same way, but this time we're going to be looking for the measure of an angle. So angle R is right here. And so we have the opposite side and we have the adjacent side. So we're still going to set it up the same way. We're going to say the tangent, because that's the opposite and the adjacent. That's the trig function we use when we have the opposite and the adjacent side. So the tangent of angle R is equal to 47 over 41. Now, the difference here is what do we do? How do we figure out what that r is? So really what we're going to do is we're going to do the inverse tangent to undo this tangent function. So we're going to do tangent 1 of all of that. And so if we do it to one side, we have to do it to the other side as well. So we're going to do the inverse tangent of this side. So what these do is they cancel out, just like multiplication and division. They're inverse operations. They go away. So then I have r equals the inverse tangent 47 over 41. Okay, so we're just going to use the inverse tangent button on your calculator. And so if you're using Desmos Scientific Calculator, you're going to have to make sure you're in the right spot. And if you can't find it, let me know. But all scientific calculators should have a tangent inverse button. And so then you do the inverse tangent of 47 over 41, and you get that angle R is 49 degrees. When we're solving for missing angles, we also are going to use other inverse functions for all three of the trig ratios and the trig functions that we're using. So they're all just the function with that inverse there. So that's the inverse tangent and the inverse cosine and the inverse sine, the inverse cosine, and the inverse tangent. Okay, so and do this one here. It's a right triangle, so I'm going to label it as a right triangle, and it says a leg is 1.5 units. The hypotenuse is 4 units. And we want to find the measures of all of its acute angles to the nearest degree. So I'm going to label these angles x and y. Okay, so if I want to start with x, for angle x, I have the adjacent side and the hypotenuse. And so I'm going to do the cosine of x equals 1.5 over 4. Okay, so again, we're going to do the inverse cosine to get rid of that, and we'll get x equals the inverse cosine of 1.5 over 4, or the arc cosine is another way that sometimes we refer to those inverse functions. And so if you punch the inverse cosine of 1.5 over 4 or the arc cosine of 1.5 over 4 in your calculator, you're going to get 68 degrees. So angle X is 68 degrees. Okay, so from here you can go about this two ways. You can subtract 180 minus 68 and then get this one that's all, and say that this one is 22 degrees. Or we can do another trig function. So we're going to do the inverse sine or the arc sine. Or I'm sorry, the sine first, and then we'll use the arc sine to solve. Okay, because we have the opposite and the hypotenuse. So then we'll do the inverse sine or the arc sine. And so we get 1.5 over 4. And so that also gives us 22 degrees. So you can use what you know about triangles, and you can also use what you know about trig functions to solve for those two missing angles. Okay, we'll do one more here. So there are a number of different ways we can do this. I'm just going to show you one way. On the notes that I've uploaded, I will show a couple different ways. But I'm just going to pick here, we need to find x and y. So I'm going to start with I'm just going to use the sign here for x. Okay, so the sine of x is 60, because that's the opposite side, over 87. And I just arbitrarily picked that. I just picked sine because it was the first thing I thought of. Okay, you could use any trig function. There's 3 different ways to find every single one because we have all the sides of the triangle. Okay, and so then we'll do the inverse sine or the arc sine of 60 over 87 in your calculator. And so you should get 44 degrees. Okay, and it doesn't matter which trig function you use, as long as you set it up correctly using the correct ratios and the correct inverse functions, then you should get the same angle measures. Okay, now I'm going to do y, and I'm going to pick a different trig function. So let's do the tangent of y. So then we would use the opposite, which is 63, over the adjacent, which is 60. Okay, and then I'll do the inverse tangent, or the arc tangent, on my calculator of 63 over 60, and that'll get me the angle measure of 46 degrees. Okay, and again, you can always check yourself here. 46 plus 44 plus 90, that gives me 180, so I know I've done that correctly. Okay, so it's not really a whole lot new, it's just how we undo those trig functions today to find the missing angles. Okay, so if you have a hard time finding those buttons on your calculator or you need any other assistance, please let me know. The notes are uploaded, and again, on this one I've shown a number of different ways for each of the angles that you can find in this triangle. So you can see that there's multiple options, and they should all get you those same answers of 46 and 44. Okay, let me know if you have questions. Otherwise, have a great day.